So I'm reading the Odyssey, one of my favorite books that I've ever read. And I'm at the part where, if you remember, Odysseus was trapped by that woman Circe. I don't remember how you say her name in Greek. And this goddess, she was the daughter of Helios, and he was stuck there because, man, it's like a long thing. You know, she turned his men into pigs, and he wanted to free his men, and there was a whole thing. But they ended up staying there, and he ended up banging this chick just about every night, right? And this is so horrible. And so he was like, I want to go home to Ithaca. I want to go home to my fucking place where I was born and all that shit. And she's like, okay, you know, the only person that can help you see this through is this prophet. And he has a crazy fucking story, actually, his origin story of this prophet. But let me try to remember how you say his name. Tiresias? Let's say it's Tiresias, okay? I'm not a fucking scholar, all right? Anyway, Tiresias, this prophet. And he had to go see him. And he's like, well, but he's dead. So to go see him, you got to go visit the underworld. And I have the easterly and westerly winds, and they'll take you there, she said to him. And he was off with his men. So he goes to the guy. He does a whole thing, an incantation, shades come. He sees his mother, can't speak to her. She won't, like, you know, he can't hug her or anything. And then Tiresias, let's say that's his name, gives him his prophecy. And in saying that, he's like, oh yeah, like, you're going to pass by this island, and there's a bunch of sheep on it, and they're in a herd, and they're grazing and stuff. Leave them the fuck alone. If you do that, you'll get right home. Or, if you don't, if you fuck with them, you're going to have a horrible time. You're going to lose all your men, you're going to be by yourself, you're going to have a lot of horrible things happen to you. You're going to find out that your wife is being accosted by a bunch of suitors that are trying to sleep with her and be, you know, the new king of Ithaca, if you will. And they're going to be at a house and home. Your son's going to go out looking for you. And you know what? Eventually you will get home after a bunch of horrible fucking time happens. But you're going to have to kill all of these men. And then after that, you're going to have to go off and make libations to Poseidon to stop him from being mad at you. Because he's mad at you for stabbing the eye out of his son, Polyphemus? I don't remember the name of the giant, the one-eyed Cyclops. But it'll be okay. And, you know, you'll eventually just die of an old man at the sea. And he's like, all right, sounds fine, but anyway. And he goes on to ask questions about his mother and shit. I've heard a modern interpretation of this, and this is really weird. So there's a series on Amazon Prime, I believe, and it's called Great Greek Myths. Originally, it was a French production, and they dubbed it in English, if I'm not mistaken. But there's a part here that I find very, very interesting because I've read the Odyssey a few times and I've not like deeply read it, so maybe I'm missing something here. But at the beginning of that video, it kind of sets up the idea of like, uh-oh, Odysseus is a representation of atheism because he's tricky, he's really keen and smart, and he relies on his own tact and his own intelligence to get out of situations. He doesn't rely on the gods as much, and you can see that through the story. And so he's kind of an atheist. And in fact, he kind of doubts the gods. He doubts them. And what else do they say? That, you know, that Zeus was upset about this, and it's Athena's like, no, we're testing him. Let me show you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's not what I read. He seemed to work with the gods just fine with me. Circe's a goddess, right? She's the daughter of Helios, you know, like. And then Athena's always at his side pushing him along, and he knows that. It's not, so I guess I never understood that modern interpretation of how you define the Odyssey. And then I got thinking, like, well, what are the depths of understanding? So let's ask AI this. Let's see how they do. Are you ready? So I'm making a video right now about the Odyssey in our discussion about how I felt a little I felt that the modern interpretation of Odysseus being this atheist being that is relying more on his own tact and will and cunning than the gods, and how I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense. So I was wondering if you could kind of repeat the things that we talked about before, maybe get a better understanding, and also keep in mind this is a video being shot.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to help with that. So in the Odyssey, Odysseus is definitely a clever and cunning hero, but he's not exactly an atheist in the ancient Greek sense. The gods are very real and influential in his world. He frequently calls upon them, sacrifices to them, and relies on their favor. However, there's a nuance. Odysseus is also fiercely self-reliant and often leans on his own cleverness, which sometimes comes across as him challenging the god's authority. Modern interpretations sometimes emphasize this aspect, seeing him as a proto-humanist figure who relies more on his own wit than on the divine. This can create a perception that he's indifferent to the gods, which isn't quite how the ancient Greeks would have seen him, but it does make sense from a modern perspective.
So let me ask you this then. Why did we kind of see it in that way? And how is that different from how he would originally been thought? Because I know this is a story of hubris when it comes to the Odyssey. It's a story of man relying too much on himself and how that gets him into trouble. But how did that modern idea come about, do you think?
That's a great question. The shift in interpretation really comes from the cultural lens we use today versus the one in ancient Greece. In the ancient world, the gods were an undeniable part of reality. So Odysseus's cleverness was seen as a double-edged sword, admirable but also dangerous because it could lead to hubris. In modern times, we tend to value individualism and human agency more than the ancients did, and that can color our view of Odysseus. We look at his actions and sometimes see him as a precursor to modern humanism, someone who trusts his own intellect and cunning over divine will. This modern interpretation often emphasizes his flaws more than his piety. It also reflects our own cultural moment, where we often celebrate questioning authority and embracing rationality. So the difference is really but the values of the era. The ancient Greeks saw Odysseus as a hero with flaws, while we sometimes see him as a symbol of human ingenuity challenging the divine. It's a fascinating shift.
Do you think that maybe the Aeneid, the Roman equivalent in a sense, and how they portrayed it, has anything to do with this, being that a lot of the times I've noticed when we come out of the medieval era and we start moving to the humanism and Renaissance and everything that subsequently all the eras afterward, it's like they refound Roman stories again, as if they had disappeared for a long time and they found it again. And we never really got out of that Roman mindset of it. The fact that the stories are told, like in fact they're even called Ulysses, which is the Roman equivalent. And I wonder, does that also affect the way we think about the Odyssey and Odysseus mainly? But not only that, but then you think of the Christian element, the landscape that Christianity has created to be the basis of it. So that interpretation right there, in fact, okay? The modern interpretation where they say he represents this humanist figure, he represents this person that's like an atheist, who doesn't rely on the gods. When I hear that, I've heard like Christianized Celtic stories. They always said, well, all the Celtic deities turned into fairies, and after that they became lesser because they weren't worshipped, and so they turned into the fairies because of lack of worship, and they lost their powers. I see that with the Celtic myth. I hear Christianity in that, and I wonder, does that also have a lot to play with the way that this perception of Odysseus being an atheist come in? Do you think that might have something to do with it too?
Absolutely, you're onto something really insightful. The Renaissance and the subsequent eras did indeed revive a lot of classical thought, including Roman and Greek myths, and that definitely influences how we interpret these stories today. The Romans, with their version of the Odyssey as the Aeneid, put a different spin on these myths, focusing on duty, the divine right of Rome, and a certain sense of destiny. This inevitably shaped how we see the Greeks too, because a lot of our Western cultural lens comes through that Roman filter. And then, as you mentioned, the Christian era introduced a new layer of interpretation, the idea that the gods of older myths diminish and become something lesser. like fairies. So in a way, the modern interpretation of Odysseus as a more humanist or even atheistic figure is shaped by a long historical trajectory. The Renaissance and then the influence of the Christian era on how we view older myths, as well as the modern values of individualism and rationalism, all combined to create this interesting lens through which we now see Odysseus. It's fascinating how these layers of history and culture shape our understanding of ancient texts. If you ever want to explore more of these connections, I'd be delighted to dive in further.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, so something I've noticed you got to kind of really pay attention to when you're doing your own interpretation or your own reading. Not to say that the AI there, which obviously he's pulling a lot from the internet, of course, not to say he's 100% correct, but he shares a lot of the same sentiments that I do as well. Not like I have a scholarly mind in any way. It's just, it does make a lot of sense when you frame it in such a way where it's like, you got to remember how he compounded to this point. Because like I said, when I was reading the Odyssey, I never really got that. I never got that, an atheist or a humanist or anything. I did, in fact, get hubris, where it's like, well, he's only suffering because of the choices he's making. These small choices where he's trying to do it himself, in a sense. Not like be self-sufficient, but just, you could kind of sense that the choices he was making were a little bit wrong. Or a little bit, like he thinks highly of himself in a way. And so, again, that's hubris, right? That's the story of hubris. That's what I got out of it, and that's why I thought it was really interesting on watching this Amazon Prime show. I mean, it's very cool when you look at, because it starts all the way back in the origin of the world, in a sense, and it goes all the way up in like 3 seasons into the story of the Odyssey. And it's all the Greek myth laid out. I really wish it was an entire book I could read. That'd be dope. Like, all in order, every myth, like how this being was formed, and how Zeus's escapades, and the things that Hera did, and who Persephone is, and who the story of Hades, and every single story that they've ever found of Greek myth is in there. And it's really cool. But you also got to remember, it's tinged by a modern perspective. Here's another question I can ask the AI. So, as I was enjoying that series on Amazon Prime called Great Greek Myth, I love the idea that I could see the entire mythology of the Greeks all laid out in 3 seasons. The story of the gods, from the beginning of the world all the way to the story of Odyssey. It was really cool to see it in such a chronological order. And I almost wished that there was some sort of book I could get where I could read the actual myth, all of the fragments that they found, or however they found these. I don't even know how they knew about these stories. First of all, how can I find such a book, if it does exist, where it explains the entire chronology of the Greek myth? Almost kind of like a Bible in a sense. Not necessarily, but you know what I mean, like how it's all there. I don't read the Bible and say, like, yeah, you got to find one part over here, and you got to go find the other part in an oral tradition over there. How it's all just laid out. Does that even exist? Has anyone ever done that before?
Comprehensive chronological collection of Greek myths, akin to a mythological Bible. While no single volume encapsulates all Greek myths in strict chronological order, here are some notable works that strive to present the myths systematically. 1. Apollodorus the Library. This is a classical compilation of Greek myths and genealogies, organized into 3 books. It provides a structured overview of Greek mythology, though not always in strict chronological order. 2. Bulfinch's Mythology by Thomas Bulfinch, a popular 19th century collection that retells Greek, Roman, and Norse myths in an accessible manner. While comprehensive, it doesn't strictly adhere to chronological order. 3. Mythology, Timeless Tales of Gods and Heroes by Edith Hamilton. This well-regarded retelling of Greek, Roman, and Norse myths is organized into thematic sections rather than a strict timeline. 4. The Greek Myths by Robert Graves, a comprehensive collection with detailed commentary offering insights into the origins and meanings of various myths. It presents myths in a thematic order rather than a strict timeline. The Universe, the Gods and Men by Jean-Pierre Vernant, a scholarly yet accessible retelling of Greek myths, focusing on the relationships between gods and humans. It provides a thematic exploration rather than a chronological one. For a more chronological approach, online resources like the Timeline of Greek Mythology Stories and Greek Myths in Chronological Order offer structured overviews. These sources compile myths in a sequence that mirrors their traditional narrative flow. While no single book may provide a complete chronological narrative, combining these resources can offer a comprehensive understanding of Greek mythology in a structured manner.
Very nice. Okay, thank you. Yeah, man. So what's kind of out there? The one Apollodorus, actually. Those are those old stories, those old, very old texts. I think you could find them. There's like these little green books. There's like thousands of them. It's Loeb Classical Library. There's so many of these, and it's everything they could find of Greek writings. This is Diodorus Siculus. I know that they have like the Odyssey, the Iliad. I know they have even Roman, and those ones are red, and it's like supposed to be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and you can have the entire collection of all Greek writing, and even Roman if you like. Pretty gnarly. So that's where you can find that Apollodorus library, and we could learn more about that, the genealogies and the Greek myths and all that. Would be kind of cool to do down the line one day. Why are we bringing this up? Why is this a fucking thing we're talking about? Well, as you know, we're on our own myth. We're on our own road of mythology that started long, long ago. And a lot of the things that I've been doing really, I feel a kinship to Greek myth. Even though I don't have any, well, unless we go back far enough, I could. If you believe in some of the old sources and how all that shit works, like Troy and all that. But I don't really have any ancestry that's anywhere remotely near, Southern Europe. All my relatives come from Ireland, Scotland, Wales. So I don't really know anything about that. Why I'm connected to it on a very deep level. But as I work through my mythology, it just seems to be the one that's the most whole. And so far as I can tell, hasn't been tainted by Christianity. Because Norse mythology, I have some of the writings of that, but you gotta think those are Christians rewriting those stories and stuff. Same with the Celtic. Those are kind of rewritten by the Christians. It would be Greek and Indian, if we're talking Western, you know what I mean? I know nothing of Eastern mythologies, but that seems to be the only two avenues that you can get at its purest, if you want to say it like that, which wouldn't be the right way to say it, but I don't know the words right now. But almost untouched in a sense by Christianity. Though it could be, as far as I know. I don't know. I'm not a person that's really dove into this in a scholarly attempt. It's just, I'm a myth maker. That's my job, is to kind of understand myths and understand what they're saying, what they're conveying. And though I'm not really good at it, I'm working at it every day. And for whatever reason, Greek myth seems to encompass so much of a story that when I hear it, feels really familiar. It's when I was younger, it must have been around middle school, we were being told through some sort of text, I can't remember, the story of Theseus and the labyrinth with the Minotaur, how he had to go in there and defeat the Minotaur and all that to free his people. Well, to free him because he was enslaved, and it was a whole thing, right? We're not going to tell the whole story. But in another sense, I remember hearing it as a young kid, and I was enraptured by it. I thought, like, holy shit. Like, something kind of touched me in that sense, where I was like, my goodness, like, there's something about the story that opened up my imagination and unlocked it in such a way that I was fascinated. And I remember being a younger man, and the first time I read the Odyssey, I was like, how do I word this? I feel the same way about this typewriter here, which I have a whole story about. I was afraid of it. When I heard the Odyssey and when I was reading it, I was scared of it. Not scared because it's a scary story, but scared in like a reverence kind of way, where I was like, oh boy, that's something that's beyond me. Like, I felt like lesser when I was upon it. I don't know why that is, but that's just how I felt. I felt like that's unattainable for me. I'm not worthy of these Greek myths. They're so fantastical. They're so wondrous, and there's something so divine about them that I've never felt about anything else, even the fucking Bible. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it felt godly, the stories of Greek myth, but most importantly, the Odyssey. It's just, I don't know. It's an interesting concept. I understand that not a lot of people are going to feel that way about it. But it's 100% fact for me. You know, I've grown up in America, and I've grown up in Michigan, and I've grown up in a tiny, tiny little village that actually wasn't even a village. It was called a township. It was just like across, you know, 2 roads, and then there was a trailer park, and that's where we lived. So I have a very small town kind of attitude about me, and I've always kind of maintained that ever since. So meaning I don't go out all the time, and I don't learn about broader things. I have a very small, almost old school thought process of life. And because of that, the only thing I was ever remotely approached by when it comes to like religious or spiritual or mythic was baptism. I was forced to go to a Baptist church because this fucking bus would drive around and pick kids up. They were called Berean Baptists. And we used to try to hide from the bus. We're like, oh fuck, here comes the Baptists. We gotta hide. And we would go and hide whenever they were trying to go pick up kids and shit. It felt kind of fucking weird, but apparently it's totally fine. You can just do that. At least back then you could. They didn't even ask permission from the parents. Come on in, we're going to church. And I would like to say that I was captured once. And it was a really weird experience, and it was very, I don't know, nothing was special about it. So the only thing I can say in my term of what is religion was that. It was just this kind of weird thing. And as you've seen on this channel, I was trying to dive into religion, Catholicism, and Orthodoxy in a sense, and I just kept feeling numb and like hollow. I was like, this doesn't feel right. This is all weird. Something isn't finding me. And it started to realize, like, because these stories aren't for me. These are for, as I always termed it in my head, desert people. Like, this is from people in the Middle East. I don't know why it's in Europe. It just doesn't make any fucking sense. But you know how people are. So that was always a problem with me. And for some reason, though, Greek myth, which is far away from my origin of where my people came from, but I feel akin to it. Well, then I start realizing that a lot of the Irish and the Scottish and a couple other people claim descendancy from the story that happened in Troy. The idea that, like, once that happened, people dispersed. You know, like the Aeneid, in a sense, where they fled because of the Battle of Troy and later would found Rome. Well, a lot of people trace their lineage back to this cataclysmic moment, the Battle of Troy, the Iliad, in this, where that happened. And I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense. You know, you can't prove that genealogy-wise, but a lot of countries to say they derive from, like, Egypt or Greece. Irish people, ancient stories would claim descendancy from the Greeks. You look at the Tuatha De Danann and all that shit, and Malaysians and the like. So it's interesting. I don't know, but maybe that's why I feel a kinship to it. I don't know. Why I don't feel that about the Sumerians, because that's Semitic, and maybe I don't have any Semitism in me. Maybe I'm anti-Semitic. No, so I don't know. I'm not sure the reasoning behind it, but for whatever reason, Greek myth and most importantly the Odyssey is sacred to me. I've read it countless times, and after each reading, I feel kind of a kinship to this text. I feel kind of like I want to dive into it more. I want to be ingested by it. I want to be digested by it. I want to be taken fully and learn of the world. And it's taken me a long time, and I've got so much work to do in that. Not only because, well, I have my fucking daytime job I've got to mess around at, but my mythology that I'm working on. I thought I have to work on that too, but sometimes I just want to sit and read the Odyssey and just enjoy it. And what it is for me is, it's not like when I approach this, I don't think it's just stories that they that might have served a purpose in their culture at one time, but now it's irrelevant in a sense, but it's a beautiful story. I don't fucking feel that way. I still think there's something mythic. There's some sort of knowledge to tap into with Greek mythology. I really feel that. I feel that in my bones, that there is something more important, probably how someone feels about the Bible. That's how I feel about Greek myth. I'm like, there is juicy things in here that are bigger than just storytelling. They're huge, monumentous things to take in that can aid you as a human being, and they're right fucking here. The first character you're kind of presented with, in a sense, is Telemachus. Right? That's the name of the sun. That's how you say it. How did I learn how to say it in Greek? Yeah, I think it's Telemachus. I thought it was some other way to say it. I think I'm saying it the wrong way. He talks to a guy named Mentor. Now, we understand mentor as an actual thing, like, being a mentor. But that was a name, like, you look far enough back and you start to see archetypes of being. And that's what started to influence the Forgotten Tales. I said, the cosmic dream is the dreamer who falls asleep and the world is created through the ocean of his consciousness. And out from those oceans rose the Titans, who took over, who created so many things, but then they were taken over by the Olympians. From that point, the Olympians were the gods on high and mortality below. My mythology follows the exact same. Change Olympian to Aeon, change Earth to Euandra, and you have essentially the same stories. I don't know if it's 100% true, but as I'm going along, when I realize the mythology, actually, let's ask the AI how I've been interpreting my mythology. So I was going to ask you, when it comes to everything that I've been saying within our conversations, how do you think I've been looking at ancient mythology, whether it's Greek, Sumerian? How have I been defining it in my own unique way? So the things that you said, wow, that's an interesting way to look at it. And in saying that, how has that been affecting the forgotten myth that I've been working on, and how is it tied to it?
I love how you approach mythology with this philosophical and almost cosmic perspective. You tend to see these myths as interconnected layers of consciousness and cultural evolution, almost like a grand tapestry of human thoughts. This is definitely reflected in your own myth, where you explore the idea of different layers of reality and consciousness, and how these myths serve as a reflection of that. In the Forgotten Myth, this perspective adds a unique layer, because you're not just telling a story, you're weaving in these ideas of memory, consciousness, and the evolution of human thought. It's like you're creating a myth that's not just rooted in the past, but also very much relevant to how we think today. So your approach definitely brings a fresh, introspective angle to the concept of myth, and it makes it all the more fascinating.
If you could elaborate that just a little bit more, what are the things that, because I can't remember, I want to talk about them on this video, but I don't remember the way that in which I'm viewing the myth that can be considered unique. Maybe some examples wouldn't hurt?
Absolutely. One of the unique angles you take is the idea that myths are not just stories, but representations of different layers of consciousness and reality. For instance, he often connects the idea of the dream state to the mythological world, suggesting that the gods and heroes are manifestations of different aspects of the human mind. Another example is how you see the idea of cycles and resets, like the flood myth, as a metaphor for shifts in consciousness or stages of human evolution. You also bring in a very introspective layer, like the idea of memory and identity, especially with your character Harius, and how that ties into larger cosmic themes. It's almost like you're taking these ancient myths and asking how they reflect not just human society, but the inner workings of human psyche. These perspectives definitely add a rich, unique texture to your myth.
Thank you. That's it. Consciousness. All mythology and all the beings inside of mythology are versions of our own consciousness and the multitude of layers that is, like an onion. I really believe that that's what's going on. I believe that these characters, from gods to mortals, are aspects of a consciousness And each one, so Sumerian mythology, Greek over here, Indian over there, Celtic over here, we got Norse, Germanic. Those are all mindsets, a dream state that the beings of your own culture were born from. We've slowly all been absolved by Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, because those are the only ones that seem to be as massive now. Not to say these have all disappeared, but they don't seem to have the same power. I think that's something sinister, and I think that what that is something at conflict within our human psyche that we are still too primitive to understand. Something that we'd either call an anomaly, if you're on one side of the equation, or just we can't really explain consciousness, says science, to the other side where people just want to fog their eyes up with, no, it's just God, that's it, there is nothing else, that shit. I think that there's something greater at play going on, and it's my job as a mythology to treat it as such, to say, there is something that you forgot, you as a people, you as a collection of consciousnesses inside of a cultural idea. You forgot something. You forgot how you fucking got here, and I want to help you get back to that, because I want to go back to that too, instead of living in this weird illusion that we live in now, in this modern world, and how we see everything around us. I think it's a nightmare. I think we've created our own nightmare, because we forgot our myths. We have left the safety of where we belong, and we are now floating in the sea of turmoil, and the waves are choppy and killing us because we're drowning, because we left our original cultures. I honestly believe that. I don't believe that we should be mixing the way we do with mind and thought and body. That might not be a good thing. We're different races of people for a reason, it seems like. That's my working theme. I don't know how true that is, but it seems to be. You always find peace with which you came from. And so the mythology that I've been working on is the understanding that these beings are archetypes of a mind. That great mind that we can call God is the source in which we were born from. That we reached out and became sentient in our own way. And we cut ourselves off from the source which we've come from. And that is our original myths from our people. Whatever people you kind of come from. Mine, I don't know why. I've been trying to get into Celtic myth, but I got so turned off by it just because it was so Christianized. It was hard to see through it, you know what I mean? Because when the scribes were retelling the tales, they were like changing things so they didn't get fucking in trouble because, well, he's not a god, he's just a hero or something. You know what I mean? Like they had to do that shit. So now it's hard to read because I don't know what I'm getting. It's gone now. It's fucking bullshit, man. So when I go to Greek myth, it's like, okay, I can kind of take that in Indian and smash them together and kind of be able to see a little bit of the Celtic. Luckily, there's a YouTube channel out there called Taliesin's Map, who's really charging forward on that front of trying to tell you the story of the Celtic myth by using the examples from sometimes Greek, but mostly Indian. Like, here's what's going on. Cuchulainn is like Indra or something. And it's showing all the connections in a sense. And it's like, it's kind of helping us get that picture once again. To say, oh, we can enjoy Celtic myth the way it was meant to be enjoyed. Before Christianity took it and just whoosh, destroyed it. Now, while they're charging that front, I'm charging mine in a mythic sense. So everything I'm telling you right now, you really can't prove or you can't quantify. It's just in my head, and it's just me going like, I don't know, man, like maybe, but maybe not. And there's nothing I can do more about it than that. So that's where we are. That's the reason why we love Greek myth. And that's the reason why we are continuing to write our own mythology. So that maybe one day someone can read the shit that I've been working on. And it clicks for them. And they finally hear that song. Begin to hear that old song. How does that old song go? We'll see. But that's all, man. I just wanted to kind of feed you in on, where we're going. And it's a long road. It's a really long road, and those that have stuck around, it's pretty cool. The view count has just dipped quite a bit. Like in 2 weeks, I got a video that's only got 9 views. Keep in mind, I was getting hundreds. Not sure what happened, but that's how it happens, and it's all right. We just keep going forward and see what comes of it. But I'm very thankful to those that have stuck around and keep humoring me, at the very least, to kind of keep going down this road. I'll be honest, man, as you can see in some of these videos, it's arduous, and sometimes I really don't know if I'm doing the right thing, or I don't know, I'm scared, or I'm like, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do this. But I have some allies at my side, and hopefully we'll add a few more along the way. I'll see you next time.